and I am about to tell you a story that proves justice is not about shouting, it is about structure. When my son Evan died, his wife Nicole inherited everything. $68 million and a sprawling Texas villa. Hours after the funeral, she threw me out. She literally pushed me out the door and told me to go die in a dumpster. She thought she had won. She thought the old man was finished. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that my son and I had one last project together, and the blueprints were perfect. Before I continue, please let me know which city you are listening from. Your support means the world to me. And if you have ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated you, hit that like button and subscribe. You are not alone. I was standing in my son's study. I am, or I was, a structural engineer. I find comfort in logic in things that are built to last. This room lined with dark cedar smelled of old books and Evan's cologne. It was the only room in the house that still felt like him. Outside the wide glass window, the Austin Hill country stretched out, the oak trees standing like silent witnesses. We had just put Evan in the ground. My son, 40 years old, gone. The click of the door latch was sharp, precise. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Her perfume, a heavy, expensive scent, always arrived before she did. Nicole, my daughter-in-law, walked in. She was 35, and even in her grief, she looked flawless, which is to say she showed no grief at all. The black dress she wore to the cemetery was gone. In its place was a silk blouse the color of new money, a bright, jarring green. Her eyes were clear, dry, and impatient. "Mr. Powell finished the reading," she announced. Her voice was flat, like a pane of glass. No sorrow, just business. "While you were out here, brooding." The small dig was typical. I had been out in this garden trying to breathe. For the last 6 months, I had lived in this house, sleeping on a cot in the guest room, listening to the agonizingly slow decline of my only child. Pancreatic cancer. It had ripped through him, leaving a shell that I barely recognized. But I had been here for every second of it. "And?" I asked, turning to face her. A small, tight smile played on her lips. A smile of pure victory. "It's all mine, Owen. The will was very clear. This villa, and the $68 million. $68 million. That was the last valuation of Harris Data Analytics, the company Evan built from his college dorm room. My son was a genius, and he had married a predator. A cold dread, heavier than grief, settled in my stomach. "Nicole," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I tried to appeal to some shared humanity. "He was my son. We just buried him." She cut me off. Her eyes went from cold to ice. "No," she said, stepping forward. "He was my husband, and that's over." She crossed her arms, a gesture of finality. "Now you are a guest in my house, and I want you to leave." The words just hung there. "I want you to leave." I must have looked confused because she sighed as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "Leave, Owen. Leave. Get your things and get out." I stared at her. "Get out." "Go where, Nicole?" "I sold my condo in Houston to come here. Evan wanted me here. He asked me to come." "Evan is dead," she said, shrugging as if discussing the weather. "He doesn't get a vote anymore. I need my space. I need to move on, start fresh. And I can't do that with you haunting the halls, a sad old relic reminding me of sickness." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I had sold my home, the small quiet place that I had shared with my late wife, Clara, the home where every corner held a memory of her. I sold it, cashed out my retirement savings, all at Evan's request, 6 months ago. He had called me, his voice already weak. "Dad, I need you. I don't want to be alone with her." So I came. I transferred my entire life savings into a liquid asset account, sold my property, and moved into this mausoleum. I thought I was doing it for my son. I thought I was part of his family. But my things, I stammered, feeling the pathetic weakness of my position. My clothes, my photos of Clara, they're still in the guest room. Nicole laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was short and dry like a bone snapping. That junk. She walked past me to the study door and pulled it wide open, holding it like a doorman dismissing a beggar. I already called a service. They're coming tomorrow morning to clear out the clutter. They do estate sales, I think. Or maybe they just haul it to the dump. Either way, it's out of my hair. She looked at me, her expression hard. I'd suggest you be gone before they arrive. It would be embarrassing for you. I couldn't move. She was talking about my life, the physical remnants of my 70 years, my wife's portraits, my engineering books. Gone. You're throwing me out, I said, the words tasting like ash. The same day as my son's funeral. This is my house now, she insisted, her voice rising. My life, my money, and you are not welcome in it. The last shred of her patience was gone. She strode forward, placed a perfectly manicidal hand on my chest, and pushed. It wasn't a violent shove, but it was firm. A push of utter dismissal, a 70-year-old man being pushed out of his son's home. Go on. I stumbled back out of the study and into the grand, cold hallway. Nicole stood in the doorway, framed in the dark wood, a queen surveying her new clean kingdom. She looked me up and down one last time, her gaze filled with a contempt that was almost impressive in its purity. Listen, old man, she hissed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as if sharing a dirty secret. You served your purpose. You took care of the sick boy. Now you're just excess. You have no more use. She leaned in. Go die in a dumpster. The heavy oak door slammed shut. The sound echoed in the marble foyer. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the final punctuation. I stood there on the porch, wearing my funeral suit. The keys to my 10-year-old sedan were in my pocket. Nothing else. No wallet, no credit cards, no change of clothes, no home, no family, not a single possession to my name. The Austin evening air was starting to cool, but I felt a chill that came from deep inside. I stood motionless for a full minute, just trying to process the raw, unadulterated hatred. I tried to breathe, but my chest felt like it was encased in concrete. And then I remembered. The memory was so clear it cut through the shock. Evan. 3 weeks ago. He was lying in the hospital bed we'd set up in the living room, the one overlooking the garden. He was skeletal, his skin a pale, waxy yellow. The cancer had invaded everything. But his mind was still sharp. He had grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man so close to the end. Dad, he had whispered, the effort making him cough. I'm right here, son, I'd said, adjusting his pillow. Just rest. No, he insisted, his eyes locking onto mine. A spark of the old Evan, the genius, the planner. I'm sorry. About Nicole. Don't worry about that now, I said, trying to soothe him. It doesn't matter. It does, he rasped. You have to promise me something. After I'm gone. Things are going to happen. She's going to be herself. He'd given a weak, bitter laugh. She's going to be exactly who she is. I didn't understand then. I thought it was the morphine, the rambling of a dying man. Dad promised me. He squeezed my hand. Let it play out. Whatever she does, whatever she says, you do nothing. You don't react. You don't fight her. You just let it happen. Promise me. I promise, Evan, I said, just to give him peace. I promise. Now, standing on the cold stone porch of the house I helped design, cast out like trash, I finally understood. He knew. My boy knew exactly who he was married to. He knew exactly what she would do, and he had made me promise. My silence began at that moment. The rage was still there, a white-hot fire in my gut. But the promise to my dead son was a firewall. This was not weakness. This was not surrender. This was the beginning of a plan. I turned my back on the house, walked down the long, immaculate driveway, got into my car, and drove away without looking back. I drove for an hour, maybe more. The sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in colors of bruise purple and blood orange. I just drove. The familiar streets of Austin became a maze. I had no destination. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I am 70 years old. I have no home. My wallet, my credit cards, my checkbook were all in that guest room in the junk Nicole was having, hauled away. I was, for all intents and purposes, destitute. I pulled into a gas station, the check engine light on my car glowing mockingly. I searched the console and my pockets. I found a handful of change, just enough for a call. I stepped into the greasy, flickering light of a public phone booth, a relic from an age I suddenly felt very much a part of. I dialed the number from memory. It rang 4 times. Yeah. The voice on the other end was gravelly impatient. "Diane," I said. I was surprised to hear my own voice crack. "Owen, my God, where are you? I've been trying your cell. After the service, Wait a minute. You sound terrible. What's wrong?" "Diane, my late wife Clara's best friend. They had been like sisters since college. When Clara passed, Diane was the only one who didn't offer platitudes. She just showed up with a bottle of scotch and sat with me in silence. She's a retired journalist, practical, sharp as a tack, and has no tolerance for nonsense." I took a deep breath. "Nicole, she kicked me out, Diane." Dead silence on the other end. I could practically hear her processing the information. "What?" "She threw me out of the house just now, right after the funeral. She said it's all hers." A string of curses exploded from the receiver, a colorful tapestry of words that made a nearby trucker look over at me in admiration. "That bitch!" Diane roared, and I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "I knew she was a gold-plated snake, I told Clara," I said. She cut herself off with a grunt. A heavy sigh. "Where are you, Owen? Give me the exact address." I told her the intersection. "Stay right there," she commanded. "Don't move a muscle. I'll be there in 10 minutes. She was there in 8. Her old Toyota sedan screeched to a halt in front of the phone booth. She got out her silver hair, a wild halo. Under the gas station lights, marched right up to me and wrapped me in a hug. It was a solid, bracing embrace that smelled faintly of turpentine and coffee. "Get in the car," she said. Her apartment was small, cluttered with books, canvases, and half-finished art projects, but it was warm. It felt human. She pointed me to a worn-out armchair, disappeared into the kitchen, and returned with a heavy tumbler filled with amber liquid. "Drink this," she ordered. I took a sip. The whiskey was cheap and harsh, and it burned a trail of fire down my throat, but it was exactly what I needed. It burned away the cold numbness. Diane sat across from me on a stack of newspapers, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on me. "Tell me," she said, "every single word." And I did. I told her about the green blouse, the 68 million, the junk in the guest room, the push, and I told her the last line. "Go die in a dumpster." With every word, Diane's face got darker. When I finished, she sat in silence for a long time, just staring at the floor. "All right," she finally said, her voice dangerously calm. "Here's what we do. Tomorrow morning, first thing, we're calling a lawyer. My nephew's ex-wife, she's a shark. We're going to sue that creature. We'll contest the will. We'll get you—" "No," I said. Diane stopped. "No, Owen, are you in shock? Did you hit your head? She just left you homeless. I'm not doing anything, I said. I was surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. What are you talking about? I looked her straight in the eye. Evan, he made me promise, weeks ago. He knew this would happen. He knew her. He made me promise to let it play out. He said, don't react, Dad. Just let it happen. Diane looked at me like I had grown a second head. And you're going to let her win. You're going to let her spit on your son's memory, take his entire legacy after what she did to you. I set the empty glass down on a stack of art books. My hands were perfectly still. No, Diane, I said. I'm not going to let her win, but I am going to do exactly what Evan asked. I'm going to let it play out. I'm going to wait. She shook her head, baffled. I don't get you, Owen. This is the time for action, not sitting on your hands. I looked out her small apartment window at the city lights. My silence isn't passive, Diane. It's active. My son was an engineer just like me. He was a brilliant, meticulous planner. He didn't build a $68 million company by accident, and he wouldn't have made me promise something like that for no reason. I turned back to my old friend. He told me not to react, so I won't. I'm going to wait. I'm going to be perfectly, devastatingly silent, and I'm going to watch her find out what kind of structure my son really built. I settled into a quiet, painful routine at Diane's apartment. She gave me her spare room, the one filled with old canvases and the smell of oil paint. I spent my days walking by the river, trying to make sense of the new sharp-edged shape of my life. I was a ghost in my own city. But I was not idle. I was waiting. And Diane, bless her fiery, practical heart, became my eyes and ears. She would come home from her errands, drop her keys in the bowl with a loud clatter, and make a beeline for the coffee pot. Well, she'd say, pouring 2 mugs, the circus is in full swing. Diane, being of a generation that still read the local paper, but also viciously scrolled through social media, was my connection to the life I'd been ejected from. She had, with what she called journalistic curiosity, started following Nicole on Instagram. You won't believe this, she said one evening, shoving her phone in my face. There was Nicole posing in a new bright red convertible, a sports car. The caption read, starting my new chapter, #widow life, #blessed, moving on. 2 days later, another post, a lavish party at the villa. Dozens of strangers milling around my son's garden, champagne flutes in hand. She's having an estate sale, Diane reported, her voice dripping with disgust. Not a quiet one. A full-blown auction. Mid-century modern and tech memorabilia. She's selling Evan's entire life. His old computers. His collection of vintage engineering books. Even the furniture from his study. I just nodded, sipping my coffee. The furniture I had helped him pick out. The desk where he'd coded the first version of his company. Don't you want to, I don't know, scream? Diane asked, watching me. I looked at the picture of Nicole, smiling, her arm around some young, handsome man. No, I said, my voice quiet. She's doing exactly what Evan predicted. She's loud. She's fast. She's making a spectacle. She was burning through money, or at least she was spending as if the $68 million was a liquid checking account. She was putting on a show for the world, trying to prove how rich and free she was. But I knew the truth. Evan knew the truth. All she had was paper. And a house she didn't understand. She was an actress signing autographs on a stage she didn't own. Her new life was a performance, and the first bill was about to come due. She just didn't know it yet. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I had just returned from a walk, and Diane was at her painting easel, a whirlwind of gray hair and focused energy. My cheap, prepaid phone, which Diane had insisted on buying me, buzzed on the kitchen counter. An unknown number. I picked it up. Hello? A sharp, impatient breath on the other end. Owen. It was Nicole. Her voice was not the weeping, desperate tone I had heard in my imagination. It was the same cold, arrogant voice that had told me to go die. "I need the key," she snapped. No hello, no preamble. I stood very still, watching Diane's brush move across the canvas. "I'm afraid I don't understand." "Don't play stupid with me," she hissed. "I've turned this house upside down. Evan's personal safe, the little one behind the bookshelf in his study. I can't find the key. I know he gave it to you." Ah. So the performance was over. The parties and the sports car were not enough. She needed something specific. "Why would you think I have it, Nicole?" I kept my voice perfectly level, a calm, flat line. "Because you were his confidant. You two were always whispering. He probably told you to hide it from me. He was always trying to protect things." Her voice was laced with an old resentment. This was an old fight. "I'm sorry I can't help you," I said. "Listen to me, you old fool!" Her voice dropped, losing its manufactured polish and turning into a raw snarl. "I am not asking. I am telling you. That safe contains business documents. Things I need. Whatever he put in there, it belongs to me now. I am the sole heir." She was right. She was the heir to everything. My son had made sure of that. And he had made sure I would promise not to interfere. "I'm sorry, Nicole," I said again, and I enjoyed the sterile, meaningless phrase. "Give me the key, Owen, or what you want money for it." "Is that it? Are you trying to blackmail me?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. It was the first deliberate, calculated lie of my plan. It slipped out easily. It felt structural. Like laying a foundation stone. A shriek of pure frustration came through the phone. "You do know I'll call the police. I'll tell them you've stolen property from the estate." I waited. The silence from my end was, I hoped, more terrifying than any threat I could make. "I don't have what you're looking for," I said, and then I hung up. Diane stopped painting. She turned to me, a smear of blue paint on her cheek. "Well," she said, "the little piranha is starting to starve." "No," I said, looking at the phone. "She's just realized the bait was in a cage she can't open." I stood there, the cheap plastic of the phone cool against my ear. I listened to her snarl, her arrogant assumption that she could just demand, and I would obey. "I'm sorry, Nicole," I said again, my voice a quiet, flat wall. "I'm afraid I don't understand what you're talking about." It was the first deliberate, calculated lie of my plan. It slipped out easily. It felt structural, like laying a foundation stone. It wasn't just a denial. It was a move in a game she didn't even know she was playing. I wasn't just saying I didn't have it. I was withholding it. A shriek of pure frustration came through the phone, so loud, Diane actually flinched from across the room. "Don't you lie to me, you old fool. You do know I will call the police. Is that what you want? I will tell them you've stolen property from the estate. How will that look? A 70-year-old man arrested for theft. You want to die in a jail cell instead of a dumpster." I waited. The silence from my end was, I hoped, more terrifying than any threat I could make. I let her words hang in the air, their own poison. She was frantic. This wasn't about business documents. This was about something she needed. "I don't have what you're looking for, Nicole," I said. And then before she could scream again, I ended the call. The silence in the apartment was heavy. Diane had stopped painting. She was just watching me, her head tilted, a smear of blue paint on her cheek. "Well," she said, her voice low, "the little piranha is starting to starve." "No," I said, looking at the phone in my hand. "She's just realized the bait was in a cage she can't open." Diane put her brush down and walked over. "She's that desperate for a key. What's in that safe, Owen? Is it money? Did Evan hide cash from her?" I shook my head. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street, finally understanding my son's complex design. No, it's not money. I turned to Diane, the first piece of the true puzzle forming on my lips. It's something else. It's a file. It's the one thing Evan knew she would tear the house apart to find. And it's the one thing he made sure she could never ever have. The threat lingered in the air, heavy and toxic, long after I ended the call. "I'll call the police," Diane scoffed. "She's bluffing. What can she tell them? The old man I kicked out won't give me a key I can't prove he has." I shook my head slowly. "No, she's not bluffing. She'll do it. She's a creature of impulse and aggression. She'll make a scene. She will call them, and she will lie, and she will drag my name through the mud." And that, I realized, was the signal. The moment Evan had prepared me for. My son knew that Nicole's arrogance was only matched by her desperation. He knew she would eventually overplay her hand. Her threat to call the police wasn't just an attack, it was a mistake. It was the reaction that my son had warned me about. It was time. I went to my small, battered suitcase, the one Diane had managed to retrieve from a storage unit I'd forgotten I had. Taped beneath the worn lining was a single crisp business card. It was not for Mr. Powell, the public-facing executor of the will. This card was different. It was for a law firm I had never heard of. I didn't call the executor. Mr. Powell was a pawn, a man designed to read the simple, straightforward will. I dialed the number on the card. The number my son had given me 6 months ago, with the same quiet, intense urgency he'd had when he made me promise. "Ford and Associates," a crisp voice answered. "I need to speak with Ms. Ford," I said, my own voice steady. "My name is Owen Harris. It's about the Evan Harris Trust." There was a pause, a soft click, and then a new voice, sharp and intelligent, came on the line. "Mr. Harris, I've been expecting your call." Her office was not in one of the towering glass skyscrapers downtown. It was in a discreet, older brick building in a quieter part of Austin. The plaque in the lobby was small, just Ford and Associates. There was no opulence, no grand mahogany desks in the waiting room. Just quiet, expensive, understated competence. A moment later, I was shown into an office. Ms. Ford was not what I expected. She was perhaps 40, with dark, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back in a way that was severe but practical. She wore a simple, well-tailored dark suit. She didn't look like a shark. She looked like an architect. She stood up and her handshake was firm. "Mr. Harris, please sit. I'm glad you called." She didn't say she was sorry for my loss. She said it like a business partner who knew the first phase of a project was complete. You were expecting me," I said, stating the obvious. "Yes," she said, sitting down. She gestured to a file on her desk. It was a thick, bound document. "Your son was one of the most meticulous clients I have ever had. He was a brilliant planner." She let that hang in the air. This was her confirmation. I wasn't here to tell her my story. She already knew it. My mind went back 6 months, to a rainy afternoon when Evan was still Evan, before the disease had hollowed him out. He had driven me to this exact building. "Dad," he'd said, his voice serious. "Mr. Powell is my company's lawyer. He'll handle the will. That's the public part. That's for Nicole." He had tapped the steering wheel. "But you are my family. And you need to meet Ms. Ford. She handles the trust. That's the private part. That's for the structure." I remember sitting in this very office with Evan by my side. He had looked at Ms. Ford and said, "My wife is a very present tense person. She does not plan. She consumes. I have a father who needs to be protected, and I have a legacy that needs to be secured. The will is the bait. This," he had tapped the thick document she was preparing, "this is the trap." Ms. Ford had nodded. "It's a very specific and binding living trust, Evan. It's built like a fortress. But it requires a partner, someone with patience, Someone who can withstand the initial assault. Evan had looked at me. My dad is an engineer. He understands that a foundation has to cure. He can be silent. He can wait. Now, sitting in that same chair, I felt the crushing weight of that promise. He knew, I whispered. He knew she would kick me out. He anticipated it, Miss, Ford corrected gently. He anticipated several possibilities, but he knew her character. He knew she would see you as a liability, not an asset. He built this entire structure around that one predictable fact. She leaned forward, her expression shifting from professional calm to something active. You've done the hardest part, Mr. Harris. You've endured the emotional assault. You've been silent. You've let her make the first move. You've honored the plan. She smiled a thin, sharp, intelligent smile. Now it's our turn. Now we follow the blueprint. So let's clarify the situation, Ms. Ford said, her hands resting calmly on the thick file. What Mr. Powell read was the truth. The will is perfectly legal, valid, and ironclad. Nicole did inherit everything. I must have looked confused because she clarified. She inherits the villa in Austin, and she inherits Evan's entire stake in Harris Data Analytics, which as of the last valuation on January 1st was worth $68 million. She let that sit. The will is the what. The living trust, this document here, is the how. And the how is where the structure lies. She continued, your son was an engineer, Mr. Harris, through and through. He didn't believe in piles of cash. He believed in systems. He believed in load-bearing walls and stress tests. He knew Nicole saw that $68 million figure and thought of a bank account she could drain. But it's not, I said, catching on. It's stock, in a private company. Exactly, Ms. Ford said. It's stock, and the living trust which governs all of his assets has stipulations, very precise ones. This was the first part of the plan. This is why Nicole was frantic for the key. She had gone to the bank expecting to swim in cash and had found an empty pool. She had discovered that her $68 million was just paper. It gave her a title, but it gave her no money. Ms. Ford looked at me, her gaze sharp. This brings us to the present. She's just discovered she can't touch the money, so she will be looking for the next most obvious source of liquid cash. Has she made any moves to sell the other assets? Has she tried to liquidate the villa? I thought of Diane's reports, the parties, the sports car, the frantic spending. She was acting rich, but she was bleeding out. Yes, I said. A friend of mine. She's been following her. Nicole is trying to sell the villa, fast. She's hired a high-end realtor and is demanding a quick cash sale. Miss Ford's thin, intelligent smile returned. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of an engineer watching a complex machine work perfectly. Good, she said, leaning back. Let her find the buyer. Let her get all the way to the closing table. She paused, and her next words were the most comforting I had heard in 6 months. Let her run at full speed right into the first wall. I didn't have to wait long. Miss Ford had called it a wall, and it turned out to be a magnificent one. My ally Diane, who seems to have a network of informants in this town that would rival a spy agency, got the news first. She came back to the apartment 4 days after my meeting with Ms. Ford, a huge, triumphant grin on her face. She didn't even take her coat off before she started talking. She went to the bank, Diane announced, pouring herself a coffee. She finally did it. According to Diane's source, a friend who works in wealth management, Nicole had made an appointment. She had walked into the private bank that handled Evan's accounts not with humility, but with the full-blown arrogance of a lottery winner. She was wearing a brand-new dress, carrying a handbag that probably cost more than my first car, and she demanded to see the chief branch manager. She sat down, crossed her legs, and in her own words was ready to consolidate her assets. The bank manager, a very polite man who had known Evan for years, looked uncomfortable. He pulled up her file. He looked at his screen. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harris," he apparently said, "I see the will has been executed and you are the sole beneficiary. Congratulations." Nicole had just smiled and tapped her expensive nails on his desk. "Thank you. Now I want to arrange a wire transfer. A large one. Let's start with 5 million. I have expenses." This, Diane said, is where the manager turned pale. He had to explain in the most delicate banking terms possible that he couldn't transfer $5 million. He couldn't even transfer 5,000. "What do you mean?" Nicole had snapped, her smile vanishing. "Mrs. Harris," the poor man said, "your husband's accounts, the liquid cash accounts, they're empty." He explained that Evan had systematically emptied his cash reserves over the last 6 months. There was nothing left to transfer. Nicole's first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. "Empty? That's impossible. What about the $68 million? The will said $68 million. The banker, trying to be helpful, pointed out that her inheritance was assets tied up in the corporation, not cash. It was, he said, a matter for the executor of the estate. Nicole, Diane's friend said, had left the bank not in a rage but in a cold, silent panic. The first crack had appeared. She had a title, a house, and a mountain of paper, but she didn't have a single dollar. The bank manager's polite, unhelpful words were the trigger. Nicole didn't just leave the bank. She went on the attack. Her next stop was not to go home and think. It was to find someone to blame. And that person was Mr. Powell. Mr. Powell, the executor, was a man who lived by the predictable, calm rhythm of wills and probate. His office was a sanctuary of beige carpets and the quiet ticking of a grandfather clock. He was not prepared for the hurricane that was Nicole Harris. His secretary told us later, Diane, of course, got the story that Nicole didn't wait to be announced. She simply burst through the main doors, her face a mask of pale rage, and stormed past the front desk yelling his name. "Powell, where are you?" She threw open the door to his private office, finding him calmly reviewing a file. He looked up, startled, over the top of his reading glasses. "Mrs. Harris, I wasn't expecting you." "Where is it?" she shrieked, slamming her $10,000 handbag onto his antique desk, sending a cup of pens flying. "Where is my money?" Mr. Powell, to his credit, was a creature of absolute professionalism. He had been briefed by Ms. Ford. He knew his role. He knew the script. He slowly took off his glasses and began to polish them. "Mrs. Harris, please sit down. I'm afraid I don't follow." "Don't not follow me?" she yelled, her voice echoing in the quiet wood-paneled room. "I just came from the bank. They said there's nothing." "You read the will, you said $68 million. Where is it? Did you steal it? Did that old man, my father-in-law, did he get to you?" Mr. Powell sighed a small, weary sound. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please, sit, Nicole." She remained standing, vibrating with fury. He calmly reached for the thick, bound copy of Evan's will. "Mrs. Harris, the will is a very precise legal document. I read it to you, and I stand by every word." He opened it to a specific page and put his glasses back on. "As I stated, you inherit, and I quote, my entire share and stake in the private corporation known as Harris Data Analytics LLC. I don't care about the legal mumbo-jumbo," she spat. "You said $68 million. No." Mr. Powell said, his voice quiet but firm. "I said you inherited the stake, which was valued at $68 million on January 1st of this year. It's an asset, Mrs. Harris, not cash." Nicole stared at him, the legal distinction clearly flying right over her head. "So, what?" "It's just paper. It's stock," he explained patiently, "in a privately held corporation." A moment of relief washed over her face. "Fine stock. Then sell it." "I want the cash. $68 million. Sell the stock, put the money in my account. This is simple." She crossed her arms as if the matter was settled. Mr. Powell looked down at the will, then back at her. "I'm afraid I can't do that." "What do you mean you can't?" "As the executor, I can only transfer the assets to you, which I have done. You are now the legal owner of that stock. But I cannot liquidate it for you." "Then I'll sell it." "Who do I call a stockbroker?" "Give me the number." Mr. Powell shook his head, a slight, almost sad smile on his lips. "It's a private corporation, Mrs. Harris. It's not traded on the stock market. You can't just sell it." He let that sink in. He saw the panic flash in her eyes. "Then, how do I get my money?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. "Well," he said, "in a situation like this, a private sale would have to be approved." "Approved by who?" "According to the company charter which your husband drafted and signed himself, no sale or transfer of founding shares can be executed without the unanimous written approval of the board of directors." Nicole scoffed, a flicker of her old arrogance returning. "The board, fine. Who is it?" "A bunch of Evan's old college buddies. Get them on the phone. I'll convince them." Mr. Powell tented his fingers. He looked at a different file on his desk, one Ms. Ford had provided him that morning. "Well, that's the interesting part. Since your husband was the primary shareholder and board member, and since his passing, the board has, by its own bylaws, consolidated." "What does that mean?" she snapped. "It means," Powell said, looking her directly in the eye, "that there is currently only one remaining founding board member. This person, as the last founder standing, holds complete and total veto power over any sale, any liquidation, or any change in the company's financial structure." Nicole was leaning over his desk. Who is it?" Mr. Powell looked down at the paper, though he already knew the name. "It's your father-in-law, Mrs. Harris." He paused. "Mr. Owen Harris." The silence in the room was absolute. Nicole's face went from red to a sickly pale white. She looked for a moment like she was going to be sick. All the pieces were connecting in her head. The key to the safe. His infuriating quiet no. His silence. It was all a plan. She was trapped. She backed away from the desk, a strange, strangled noise in her throat. She looked at Powell as if he was the devil himself. Then the panic was replaced by pure, uncut rage. "Fine!" she screamed, snatching her purse from his desk. "Fine! You think you're so smart! You and that old nothing! You can play your little games, you can keep your worthless, stupid paper, I don't need it!" She was halfway to the door, a woman cornered and lashing out. "I still have the villa!" she yelled, turning back to point a trembling finger at him. "And it's worth $20 million free and clear. And there is no board that can stop me from selling it. I'm selling it tomorrow, and you, and that old man, you can go to hell." She slammed the door so hard the grandfather clock chimed in protest. Mr. Powell sat in the sudden silence. He picked up his pen, made a small checkmark on his notepad, and returned to his file. The first wall had held perfectly. Nicole didn't just walk out of Mr. Powell's office. She exploded from it. She was a woman possessed, fueled by a pure white-hot rage. That $20 million villa wasn't just an asset to her anymore. It was her proof. It was her victory, her revenge against me, against Mr. Powell, and against the ghost of my son. She was done with paper and rules. She wanted cash, and she wanted it now. She didn't just call a realtor. She called the most expensive, aggressive real estate agent in Austin. The kind you see on reality TV who wears sharp suits and promises impossible results. Diane, my ever-watchful ally, reported that the realtor's Instagram was suddenly full of sneak peeks of a stunning, one-of-a-kind Austin masterpiece. Nicole's only instruction to the agent was simple and desperate. "I don't care about the best price. I care about the fastest price. I want a cash buyer, and I want this done in 10 days. Of course she did. She was bleeding money. The upkeep on that villa, the taxes, the pool cleaners, the landscaping, the electricity for a 10,000 square foot home was astronomical. The credit cards she'd been using to fund her new, blessed widow life were screaming in protest, hitting their limits. She wasn't just selling, she was running. And in a hot market like Austin, fast cash for a trophy property wasn't hard to find. Within a week, just 7 days, the high-powered agent had worked a miracle. A cash buyer from California looking to relocate was hooked. They signed the initial papers, waived most of the inspections to speed things up, and a closing date was set. Nicole Diane told me was ecstatic. She was insufferable. She threw another party a pre-closing celebration. She thought she had won. She had found the loophole. She had beaten Evan's stupid, complicated games. She was already planning her move to a beach in Europe. She had in her mind, finally and completely, won. She had no idea. She was a fly buzzing triumphantly, just moments before hitting the glass. The standard title search, the last boring routine step before closing, was about to begin. And that is where Evan had laid his final, most brilliant, load-bearing wall. The deal was set to close on a Friday. Nicole, according to her realtor's triumphant social media, was already packing. She was, for all intents and purposes, a multimillionaire in her own mind. The cash was as good as in her account. The closing was scheduled for 2 p.m. at a high-end title company downtown. The buyers were there with their agent. Nicole was there with hers, wearing a white suit, as if she were the bride at a wedding. She was all smiles, tapping her pen, ready to sign the papers that would release her. This is the part of any real estate deal that is by design boring. It's called due diligence. It's the part Nicole, in her haste, had tried to skip, but the buyers, being wealthy and smart, had not. Their lawyers and the escrow company ensuring the deal had to do one final routine check. A title search. A simple computerized check to make sure the property was free and clear. They were all sitting at the long, polished conference table. The title officer, a neutral man in a bland suit, was shuffling the last of the papers. The check for $20 million was sitting right there, a cashier's check waiting to be handed over. The officer's phone buzzed. He looked at it, annoyed by the interruption. He answered, "This is Mark, closing for Harris." He went quiet. His face, which had been bored, suddenly became interested. He said, "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" "You've double-checked." He listened again. Yes, I see it now. It was filed 4 months ago. My apologies. I'll inform the parties." He hung up. He looked uncomfortable. "Is there a problem?" the buyer's lawyer asked, his senses tingling. A small one," the title officer said, turning to his computer. He typed, and there it was. It seems there is a lien on the property." Nicole laughed. "A lien, what like? An unpaid water bill, just pay it and let's get on with it." The officer shook his head, not looking at her. He was reading the screen, his eyes wide. "No, ma'am, not a water bill." "What is it, Mark?" the buyer's lawyer demanded. "It's a UCC-1 filing," the officer said, his voice now cautious. "A secured promissory note. The house, the property itself, was used as collateral for a private loan." Nicole's smile froze. "A loan? What loan? Evan didn't have any loans." "This one was registered 4 months ago," the officer said, reading. Just before he passed." "How much?" the buyer's lawyer asked, his pen already back in his pocket. This deal was dead. The title officer swallowed. $15 million. The room went silent. The buyer's agent let out a low whistle. Nicole looked like she had been shot. $15 million, she whispered. "That's correct," the officer said. "The loan is secured by the property. We cannot transfer a clear title. The loan, and its accrued interest, would have to be paid in full before the sale." The buyer's lawyer stood up, collecting his papers. "This sale is off." "Wait!" Nicole screamed, her voice cracking. Who is the loan from what bank?" The title officer looked at his screen one last time, squinting at the name of the secured party. "It's not a bank, ma'am," he said. He looked up, and I imagine he felt a small, cold kernel of pity. "The lien holder, the person the $15 million is owed to, is a Mr. Owen Harris." The call didn't come from Diane this time. It came from Ms. Ford. Her voice was calm, professional, and utterly devastating. "Mr. Harris," she said, "as anticipated, the closing for the villa did not proceed. The title search identified the $15 million lien. The buyers have officially withdrawn their offer." I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of Diane's apartment. I pictured the scene at that title company. The buyers angry and inconvenienced. The realtors watching their commissions evaporate. And Nicole. I pictured Nicole dressed in her victory suit, her face frozen in disbelief as her $20 million escape hatch slammed shut and locked with her on the wrong side. For the first time, I allowed myself to analyze her situation not as a victim, but as an engineer. I examined the structure of her new life, and I saw with clinical precision that it was a catastrophic failure. Her assets were a mirage. Asset $168 million in stock. This was her mountain of gold. But it was locked in a vault, and I, the man she'd told to die in a dumpster, was the only one with the key. It was worthless to her. It generated no income. It was just paper. Asset 2. The $20 million villa. This was her escape plan. Her liquid cash. But my son, with Ms. Ford's guidance, had turned it into a cage. By securing a $15 million loan against it, a loan representing my life savings, the money from the house I sold, to care for him, Evan, had turned her greatest asset into her greatest liability. She couldn't sell it. No one would buy a property with a $15 million question mark attached. She was trapped. But it was worse than that. She was trapped in it. She still had to pay for it. The property taxes on a $20 million estate in Austin would be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. The landscaping, the pool, the electricity, the insurance. The monthly cost to simply exist in that house was more than most people make in a year. And how was she paying for it? How was she paying for the new sports car, the parties, the designer clothes, credit cards? She was funding a multimillionaire's lifestyle on plastic. The bills must be arriving, the interest accruing, the limits being reached. I did the math in my head. No cash flow, massive unmanageable liabilities, and zero liquid assets. She wasn't just in trouble. She was insolvent. She was in a financial free-fall accelerating toward a ground made of concrete. She had moved from panic to terror. She was at this very moment a cornered animal, realizing the walls were closing in, and the only path out was blocked by the ghost of her husband and the quiet, patient presence of his father. It took 2 full days, 2 days of silence. I knew she was scrambling, calling her own lawyers, screaming at the title company, the realtor, probably even Mr. Powell again. I knew she was pacing the floors of that $20 million prison, the credit card bills piling up on the kitchen counter, the sheer suffocating terror of her situation finally sinking in. I was at Diane's kitchen table reading a book on bridge design when my cheap phone buzzed. The same unknown number. I let it buzz a second time, a third. Then I calmly picked it up. "Hello?" There was no sound at first, just a shaky, ragged intake of breath. A sound so foreign I almost didn't recognize it. It was the sound of a person who has been crying hard for a very long time. Owen. The voice was not Nicole's, not the Nicole I knew. The sharp, arrogant, ice-cold woman was gone. This voice was a wreck. It was thin, watery, and broken. It was the voice of a child, a terrified child. "Owen, please." She choked on the word. A sob, wet and ugly, burst from her. I said nothing. I just held the phone to my ear, my posture unchanged. I looked at the diagram of a truss bridge, appreciating its strength. Owen, I was at the closing, she stammered, the words tumbling out between sobs. There was a paper, a lien. Owen, they said $15 million. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. I don't understand. What's happening? Evan didn't have any loans I would know. It's a mistake, isn't it? It has to be a mistake. I remained silent. I let her terror fill the space. I let her hang twisting in the wind of her own panic. I'll lose everything, she wailed, her voice rising in hysteria. The house, the money, all the cards. They're declined, Owen. They're all declined. I have nothing. She took another shuddering breath, and her voice dropped to a desperate, terrified whisper. The whisper of someone who finally understands, who has seen the face of the monster in the dark, and realizes it's their own. They said, at the title company, they said the name. The person who holds the note. She was weeping, completely broken. Owen, they said it was you. She let out a sound that was half scream, half plea. Owen, please tell me it's not true. Tell me it's a mistake. I'll apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I said. I was upset. I was grieving. I didn't mean it. Please, Owen, you have to help me. You're the only one. Please fix this. You can sign a paper, can't you? You can make it go away. I let her desperate, frantic, lying words hang in the air for a long, perfect structural silence. I let her feel the full weight of her helplessness. I let her understand that she was completely and totally at my mercy. And then I spoke. My voice was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was not sad. It was cold. It was the voice of an engineer stating facts. The voice of a man giving instructions. Miss Ford's office, I said. She stopped crying, a sudden confused hitch in her breath. What? The office of Miss Ford, my lawyer, 10 o'clock, tomorrow morning. Owen, can't you just... 10 o'clock, I repeated, my voice cutting through her stammering. I paused, and then I delivered the final, devastating, beautiful blow. The line that changed everything. The line that told her in no uncertain terms that her life as she knew it was over, and that I was now in charge. And Nicole, I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. Bring your lawyer. I ended the call. We were there first. The conference room at Ford and Associates was a study in quiet power. No vast, sweeping views of the city. Just a long, dark, polished wood table, 12 high-backed leather chairs, and soundproof walls. It was a room designed for strategy, not for show. I sat on one side of the table, a simple glass of water in front of me. Ms. Ford sat at the head, not with my file, but with a new, much thinner one. We were calm. We were ready. We had been for 6 months. At 10:02 a.m. the door opened. Nicole burst in as if propelled by a strong wind. She was a wreck. This was not the immaculate, cold woman from the funeral. Her hair was stringy, pulled back in a haphazard bun. Her expensive silk blouse was wrinkled, and her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, her face swollen from 2 straight days of crying. She looked haunted. Trailing behind her was a man I didn't recognize. He was a young, nervous-looking lawyer, clutching a briefcase like a life raft. He looked completely out of his depth, his cheap suit a stark contrast to Ms. Ford's tailored armor. This was not a high-powered attorney. This was the first person she could find who would take her case, probably on a credit card that was now most likely declined. They sat down opposite me. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by Nicole's ragged breathing. Her lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling his papers. Ms. Ford... Mr. Harris, we are here today to discuss the The alleged lien on the Harris property. My client, Mrs. Harris, believes there has been a significant misunderstanding. Ms. Ford didn't even look at him. Her gaze was fixed on Nicole. Nicole had no time for her lawyer's pathetic script. She wasn't here for a legal debate. She was here to beg. Her eyes, red and swollen, locked onto mine. The thin veneer of her anger was gone, her arrogance shattered. All that was left was raw, primal terror. "Owen," she whispered. Her voice cracked, and the tears she had been fighting just broke. Her face crumpled. "Owen, She put her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with those same ugly, racking sobs I'd heard on the phone. I'm so sorry." Her lawyer looked at her, then at us, completely lost. I know," she stammered, looking up, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "I know what I said. I know what I did. I was grieving, Owen. I was so angry about Evan. And I took it out on you. I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't mean any of it." She was rambling, the words tumbling out. "I told him," she gestured wildly at her own lawyer. "I told him we're not here to fight. We're just here to fix this." She leaned forward, her palms flat on the dark, polished wood. Her eyes were desperate, pleading, searching my face for any sign of the old, passive Owen. "Owen, please. I am begging you, on my knees. I know I was wrong. I am so sorry. I'm sorry I told you to leave. I'm sorry for everything." The apology was as empty as her bank account, but her desperation was real. "But this loan," she said, her voice dropping. It's just a mistake, right? It's just some legal thing Evan set up for taxes, something you planned for the company." She was looking for any straw, any alternate explanation she could grasp. "Please, Owen," she whispered, the tears rolling freely now. It's Evan's house. His home. You loved him. I know you did. You can't let them take it. You can't let me lose it. He wouldn't have wanted this. This would kill him all over again." The hypocrisy was so thick I could almost taste it. You can fix it," she said, her voice childlike. You're the lien holder. That's what they said. That just means you're in charge of it, right? You can sign a paper. You can erase it. Forgive it. Please, Owen. For Evan's memory. Please. Just make it go away." She was breathless, her entire future hanging on my answer. "I'll do anything," she sobbed. I'll let you move back in. We can share it. I'll give you half. Just help me. Please, Owen, help me." She finished her plea hanging in the soundproof room and looked at me, a drowning woman begging for a lifeline. I let her desperate, frantic, lying words hang in the air for a long, perfect structural silence. I let her feel the full weight of her helplessness. I let her understand that she was completely and totally at my mercy. Her lawyer, seeing her desperation, tried to step in. "My client is clearly very distressed, but she is willing to—" He was cut off. Not by me, but by Ms. Ford. "Let's be very clear about what is happening here." Ms. Ford's voice was not loud, but it sliced through the room, cutting off Nicole's sobs like a switch. It was the voice of a surgeon, precise, cold, and utterly in command. Nicole's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "You are here," Ms. Ford continued, looking directly at Nicole, "begging Mr. Harris to erase a mistake." She shook her head once, a small, sharp gesture. "There is no mistake. There is no they. As you pointed out, there is only him." She gestured to me, but she never broke her gaze from Nicole. You seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It is not. You are here for an explanation, and you will listen. Nicole's lawyer stammered. Now see here, my client. You will be quiet, Ms. Ford said, her voice dropping a degree, or your client can face this alone. Your choice. He closed his mouth. Good, Ms. Ford said. She opened the thin file in front of her. Let's talk about the loan. You are correct. 4 months ago, a lien for $15 million was placed on the villa. You are also correct that Evan had no bank loans. He was far too smart for that. She looked at me, then back at Nicole. 4 months ago, Evan knew his time was short. He also knew his company, Harris Data Analytics, needed a final critical infusion of capital to secure its next-generation platform. A $15 million infusion. He could have sold stock, Nicole's lawyer blurted out, trying to sound smart. He could have, Ms. Ford agreed, but he didn't want to dilute the company. He didn't want outside partners. He needed a loan, a private one, from someone he could trust completely. She paused and her gaze for the first time softened as she looked at me. So he went to his father. Ms. Ford looked back at Nicole, her voice now a clinical, devastating weapon. He went to Owen. And Owen, as you know, had just sold his home in Houston at Evan's request to come and care for him. He had also liquidated his entire life's retirement savings, his entire net worth, all of it, $15 million to the cent. I watched Nicole's face as she processed this. The blood drained from it. My client was unaware of this family arrangement, the lawyer said weakly. It wasn't a family arrangement, Ms. Ford snapped. It was a business transaction, a meticulously documented, ironclad, fully legal business transaction. She slid a single piece of paper across the table. This is the promissory note. Owen Harris, the lender. Harris Data Analytics, the borrower. A loan of $15 million. But the house, Nicole whispered the word catching in her throat. Exactly, Ms. Ford said. The company needed the loan. But Owen needed security. He's an engineer, after all. He doesn't take foolish risks. So Evan, in his capacity as the sole owner of the villa, personally guaranteed the loan. He used his only significant personal asset, the house you are currently living in, as the collateral. Nicole's lawyer was shaking his head. This is unconscionable. This, Ms. Ford said, is a contract. And contracts have terms, and Evan, being a meticulous planner, was very specific about the terms. This was it, the final turn of the key. It was not a 30-year mortgage, Ms. Ford continued, her voice quiet. It was a short-term secured note, with a very specific due date. The loan, all $15 million of it, plus accrued interest, became due, and I quote, 60 days following the date of my passing. I watched Nicole's eyes try to do the math. I could see the panic as she counted the days since the funeral. Ms. Ford saved her the trouble. Evan passed away 61 days ago. The loan became due yesterday. Which means, Ms. Ford said, closing the file, as of 12:01 a.m. this morning, this loan is officially in default. Nicole's lawyer stood up, his voice cracking. So, you're going to sue for the money from the company. My client, she controls the stock. Ms. Ford smiled. The thin, intelligent, terrifying smile of an architect watching her masterpiece unveiled. No counselor, she said. We're not. Why would we bother with the stock? We have the collateral. She stood up. Mr. Owen Harris, she announced, is not here today as a grieving father you can manipulate. He is not here to erase a loan or forgive a debt. She placed her hands flat on the table, her gaze pinning Nicole to her chair. He is here today as the secured creditor, Miss Ford paused, letting the words fill the room, letting the final devastating, beautiful truth land. He is here to foreclose. He is here to collect on the asset you so kindly secured. He is here, she finished, to take the house. The room was utterly silent, save for the sound of Nicole's ragged, shallow breathing. Her lawyer, the young man who had walked in so nervously, was now chalk white. He was staring at Ms. Ford as if she had just grown a second head. A trap, he stammered, his professional demeanor completely gone. This is a setup. It's a conspiracy to defraud my client. It's a contract, Ms. Ford corrected, her voice like a steel blade. You can't do this, Nicole finally shrieked, finding her voice. The tears were gone, replaced by a wild, cornered animal fury. The will said I get the house, Mr. Powell. He read it. He said it was mine. She pointed a trembling finger at me. This is illegal. You cheated me. This is a She couldn't even form the word bay trap. Her mind was short-circuiting. Evan gave it to me. At that moment, for the first time since she had entered the room, I spoke. My voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was the quiet, measured voice of an engineer who had just inspected a bridge and found a fatal flaw. The will is real, Nicole. She stopped. Her mouth hung open. Everyone in the room looked at me. I had been a silent statue until this moment. I leaned forward, my hands resting on the dark, polished table. I looked directly into her red, swollen eyes. Evan gave you everything. I continued, my voice calm. He gave you the title. He gave you the shares. He gave you the house. He was a good man, and he wanted, even at the end, to believe you were a good person. He left you a $68 million company and a $20 million home. He fulfilled his part as a husband, and her lawyer started to mutter something, but I held up a hand, and he fell silent. But Evan also knew me, I said, my voice dropping. He knew his father. He knew that for 6 months I had slept on a cot in his living room. He knew I had sold my own home, the home I shared with his mother, to be there for him. He knew I had liquidated my entire life's savings to help his company. He knew I was an engineer, and that I would never leave him. I paused, letting the words settle. And he knew you, Nicole. He knew that the second he was gone, you would see me as, what was your word, excess. He knew you would throw me out. He knew you would tell me to go die in a dumpster. He knew you would try to sell his legacy, his work, his home for parts as fast as you possibly could. She was shaking her head, whispering, No, no, no. So he and we designed a structure, I said. A final test, an engineering problem. He gave you the house, yes, but he gave me the lien. And he gave me his word on his deathbed. I leaned in, and my voice was the only sound in the universe. The plan was simple. If you had been human, Nicole, if you had shown me 1 ounce of decency, if you had said, Owen, let's grieve together, stay in the house, it's your home too, my instructions from Ms. Ford were to extend that $15 million loan, indefinitely, for 20, 30, 50 years. The house would have been yours, free and clear to live in, to enjoy. It was a test of your character. I looked at her, my face as hard as the concrete I used to pour. And you failed. The silence that followed was absolute. The lawyer, the young man, just stared, his briefcase open, forgotten. He was witnessing a homicide, and he didn't know how to stop it. Then Ms. Ford, who had been listening with a quiet, appreciative smile, leaned back in her chair. She looked at the lawyer almost pityingly. Mr. Powell read the will very carefully, she said, her voice light, almost conversational. He did his job to the letter. He told your client, she gestured at Nicole, that she would inherit the villa and $68 million in stock. She smiled. He never said free and clear. He never mentioned unencumbered. He never said with no other legal obligations attached. Ms. Ford steepled her fingers, her eyes glinting with a terrifying professional satisfaction. The final teaser. The line from the very beginning. Tell me, counselor, did you, or your client, ever bother to listen carefully to what wasn't said? That was the final blow, the last support beam. Nicole's lawyer had no answer. He just deflated. But Nicole, her eyes, which had been darting between me and Ms. Ford, suddenly went blank. The fury, the terror, the desperation, it all vanished, replaced by a flat, terrifying nothing. Her mind had run the numbers. It had seen the trap, the contract, the test, the failure, and it had finally irrevocably shut down. She made a small, "oh" sound, a tiny little puff of air. Her body, which had been rigid with tension, suddenly went limp. Her head lolled to the side, and with a quiet, ungraceful thud, Nicole Harris fainted, sliding sideways out of her high-backed leather chair and collapsing into an unconscious heap on the conference room floor. There was no rush. Her lawyer, the young frightened man, just stared at her, unsure of what to do. Ms. Ford's assistant came in quietly, placed a glass of water on the table and a small vial of smelling salts. Ms. Ford waved the salts under Nicole's nose. Nicole sputtered, her eyes flying open with a gasp. She was on the floor, her wrinkled suit bunched around her, her hair a mess. The humiliation of that moment, dazed on the carpet looking up at our impassive faces, was perhaps worse than the financial ruin. Her lawyer fumbled to help her up. "Mrs. Harris, are you okay?" She got back into her chair, her body trembling, her face pale. She was broken. The fight was gone. She just stared at the table. Ms. Ford did not offer sympathy. She simply slid the glass of water toward her, and then with a small, precise motion, she slid a new slender folder into the center of the table. "Now," Ms. Ford said, her voice calm as if nothing had happened, "we can proceed." Nicole's lawyer looked at the folder, then at us. "Proceed with what my client is in no condition." "Your client," Ms. Ford interrupted, "is in the perfect condition. She is for the first time in a position to fully understand the consequences of her actions." She looked at Nicole. "The choice is yours, of course. You always have a choice." She tapped the folder. "These are not papers from Mr. Harris. These are the final provisions of your husband's living trust. The part he wrote for this exact scenario. You have two options," Ms. Ford stated. "Option 1, you fight. You can instruct your lawyer to sue us. You can take this to court. You can claim undue influence or duress or any other expensive, time-wasting legal term you wish. We will, of course, welcome it." Ms. Ford smiled. "And here is what will happen. We will go to court. This contract," she tapped her own file, "this $15 million lien will be proven to be 100% legal binding and ironclad. A judge will rule in Mr. Harris's favor. The court will order the foreclosure. Mr. Harris will take the house, and you, Nicole, will be evicted by a U.S. Marshal." She let that sink in. "You will be left with $68 million in stock that you can never, ever sell. You will be left with zero assets and a mountain of legal debt from the fight you just lost. That is your first choice. Utter, complete, and public ruin." Ms. Ford slid the folder open. Inside were 2 sets of documents. "Or," she said, "there is option 2. The option your husband created, hoping that in the end you were a pragmatist, not a fool." She pulled out a single document. "You sign this. It is a full, final, and irrevocable relinquishment of all your rights, title, and interest in the Harris Data Analytics stock. All $68 million of it will be immediately transferred, as Evan stipulated, to the Evan Harris Charitable Fund, which I should note will be managed by Mr. Harris and his associate, Mrs. Diane." She slid the paper in front of Nicole. "You will sign away the company. You will sign away the house which you will vacate in 48 hours. You will walk away from everything. And in return, Ms. Ford continued, in exchange for your full and immediate compliance, the trust authorizes Mr. Harris to be generous. She pulled out a second document, a cashier's check. You will receive a one-time final payment of $500,000, tax-free. It is enough for you to start a new life. It is enough for you to disappear. It is the only real money you will ever see from this estate. She placed the check just beyond Nicole's reach. The choice is yours, Ms. Ford said. $68 million of nothing, or $500,000 of cash, today. Nicole just stared at the check. Her lawyer, his eyes wide, was already nodding. He leaned over and whispered, "Take it. My God, Nicole, take it." She understood. The choice wasn't between $68 million and $500,000. It was between $500,000 and zero. Her whole body was shaking. This was the end. This was the result of her greed, her cruelty. This was the punchline. All that screaming, all that arrogance, for this. To be paid $500,000 just to go away. Her hand trembling so violently she could barely hold the pen, reached for the document. Her lawyer pointed to the signature line. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were not angry. They were not sad. They were just empty. She signed her name. She had just traded a $68 million empire for her bus ticket out of town. And in that moment she knew, and I knew, that the price was a bargain. She signed the papers. She took the check. And 48 hours later, as stipulated, she was gone. She left the villa in a rented car with one suitcase and $500,000. She left the sports car, the new furniture, and the mountain of debt she had accrued, all of which was now the problem of the estate she had just relinquished. I never set foot in that house again. Legally, the Evan Harris Charitable Fund took possession of the villa as the primary asset securing the defaulted loan. Ms. Ford, acting on behalf of the fund, immediately put the house on the market. It was sold properly and legally within 2 months. The first act of the fund was to use the proceeds of that sale to pay back its first and only creditor, me. The $15 million, my life savings, the money from my home, was returned to me in full. That house, that beautiful $20 million monument to my son's success. It held too many ghosts. It was a place of sickness, of death, and of betrayal. I wanted no part of it. With the $15 million restored, I did exactly what Evan and I had quietly discussed all those months ago. I became the primary benefactor of his fund. Together, Diane and I now run the Evan Harris Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to providing financial support to families of pancreatic cancer patients, helping them with the exact kind of overwhelming costs I had seen my own son endure. I did not buy a new mansion. I bought a small, quiet condo on the coast near a beach where my late wife Clara and I used to walk back when we were young and our whole lives were ahead of us. It is quiet. I can hear the ocean. I am 70 years old. I have lost my only son. The grief of that will never leave me. It is a structural part of me now. But I have fulfilled my final promise to him. I have protected his legacy. I have ensured that his name, his real name, is one of hope, not of greed. My silence, I now know, was not weakness. It was not passive. It was the time an engineer gives to a foundation, allowing the concrete to cure, to gain its full, unbreakable strength. I was just waiting. I was letting justice be sharpened. The last I heard from one of Diane's many sources, Nicole was working as a salesperson at a high-end clothing store in Los Angeles. Justice, I have learned, is not always a thunderstorm. It is not always loud. Sometimes it is as quiet, as precise, and as powerful as a single perfectly written and properly executed contract. What I have learned from this, what I want you to take away, is that true strength is rarely about the loudest voice in the room. It is about patience. It is about structure. My silence was my greatest weapon, because it gave my son's meticulous plan the time it needed to work. I learned that you must protect your own dignity, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is not to forgive but to enforce the boundaries that others have chosen to cross. Justice, I have found, is a blueprint. What would you have done in my shoes, and have you ever found that the quietest, most patient plan was the strongest one?